Our featured artist today is Aminah Robinson. And we are very pleased to say that she will be in conversation with Nannette Maciejunes from the Columbus Museum of Art. Aminah's going to share some stories. We'll learn more about her and her work and some of the work on display that I think should be available afterward for a question and answer session. And then we also have some copies of Symphonic Poem that Aminah will be available to sign, so you can hang around for that also. So with that, I'll just pass things on to Nannette and Aminah.
All right. So somebody said, oh, so we get to hear you. And I said, oh, very briefly. My job is to ask some very broad leading questions to Aminah. And I'll let her talk because it's really about learning more about Aminah. I mean, some of you, there are a lot of good friends in this audience. So I know a lot of you know a great deal about Aminah, but there's some new faces in this audience of people who don't know Aminah's journey. And I think that's important. I wanted to say from the sort of seat of the museum, I have never known the Columbus Museum of Art without Aminah Robinson. When I started back in, oh my Lord, 1984 at the museum, I was gone for a little while, but my history of the museum goes back to early 1984. And we already were very involved with Aminah. Through the deputy directorship of Denny Griffith, I think we deepened our relationship with Aminah. And one of the most proud moments, and I'm glad they said that there's some of these on to sell here, we've done a lot of exhibitions with Aminah over the years. Most recently, we did the wonderful bicentennial project. In fact, I have to tell the story on you. Marlena called me, and the phone rings. It's Marlena. She says, so Aminah wants to know when are we doing the bicentennial? When are you showing the bicentennial work? I said, what bicentennial work? And she said she's done a body of work on the bicentennial. It's appropriate for the bicentennial. And I said, tell her that I'm game. We're gonna do it as soon as we can do it. And it was one of the most popular parts of the city's bicentennial was Aminah's exhibitions at the museum. So we were very grateful. But our biggest project ever with Aminah was Symphonic Poem that we did in 2002. The curators were Annegret Nill, who was then our contemporary curator. Annegret's still in the city. In fact, I bet she's out of town today, otherwise she'd be sitting in the audience. And Carol Ginshaft, who was then director of education, was the other curator of the show. This was a major retrospective, and probably one of the most important things for us is that the Brooklyn Museum of Art in New York took the show. It made news in the New York Times. I believe we were in the New York Times at least twice, maybe 3 times with the show. And Brooklyn had such a response to this work, to Aminah's work, that they double booked it and they ran it to, almost never do you do a double booking like that. And we were really honored that they did that. So I wanted to say that. So, Aminah. There's so many questions I could ask. I was just going to think how to start. I think we should start with family, because I think family is very, very important to you and the story of family. And a lot of artists have people in their family who start and guide their journey from early childhood. And I thought you might talk a little bit about your mother and your father and the difference they made in the journey that you took in life. Because they had a huge influence on you as a young person and becoming an artist.
Yes, because I couldn't talk. And thanks to my father especially, who made it possible for me to observe my surroundings and be able to draw about it. And eventually I began to speak, but not in a conversational way, but in a just words. And still I'm learning how to speak because I haven't gotten there, but I'm learning. One of the things that I would like to talk about within the work is how each body of work is connected to the next. And within each body of work, there are chapters. Within these chapters are button manuscript pages. There are raganons, rag paintings, and cloth paintings. And I can go on and on about what is within this work. I remember at the museum in 1990, after Denny had curated my first exhibit at the museum, there was a luncheon, a large luncheon, and I spoke about the different works within each chapter. Well, I haven't spoken about that since, and I think it would be helpful for others to understand what I'm doing, because I'm not crazy or anything like that. But
well, people do see, all of us, you come to a gallery, you go to a museum, or you see a work of yours in a book, you see one isolated piece that might be fantastic, but you're right, it's all connected. And in fact, I know, a lot about your work, and yet it's been in the last month, they were very gracious here at Hammond Harkins. They actually closed the gallery for a few hours and brought out one of the bodies of work that actually was inspired by the current president's, by President Obama's term. And I know how it all connects, but even I was surprised, because there's this, on the floor we had this giant raganon that was a vertical raganon, which is kind of unusual for Aminah. And then there were the 4 or 5 rag paintings. Then there were the studies. There were, so you see how you connect all of these ideas and how you can explore different, each work is a unique work of art that can stand on its own, but it's so much richer when it's part of that chapter and part of that body of work. I think that doesn't get enough attention with your works.
Like Demba.
Like Demba. You want to talk about them?
Oh, God.
All right, so I'll set this up. So Aminah, there's her mother and her father particularly, who had such an incredible influence. Then we've all heard about Uncle Alvin, but there's an Uncle Alvin piece over here, and I think you should talk about Uncle Alvin in a minute. But Aminah invited me to her home a few weeks ago to show me thimble, and something she's been working on for many, many decades. This is a work that she has done, a raganon. And, Aminah's workspace is not real large. And you can only see the part of the raganon. Remember, raganons are, several feet long. In fact, the vertical raganon of the president is, I think, 25 feet tall. They really long, but realize that she only can see this little bit. And yet the raganon lives in Aminah's head, so she can see the whole thing as she works on it. So talk about the influence of thimble, this piece, this work that's been with you for decades, and you keep working on it.
Well, I started working on it in 1958. I was a second-year student
At CCAD?
at CCAD. And she is the first person who wanted me to come to her home and spend time with her. Now, you have to understand the reason why she came to Poindexter in 1943 is to bring my younger sister into the world.
So she was an active midwife.
Yes, came
She's a
on the
midwife.
bus and came to the house, but I couldn't talk. So there were 3 people really involved in my life. My father, of course, mother, but my father, Aunt Demba, she was not allowed to use Demba. It was always Big Annie, you know, that's the old...
Right. Respect for your elders, yeah. And so what did your father
Uncle
arrange?
Alvin, and
Yeah.
Uncle Alvin.
And what did your father make sure that happened?
My father made sure I got to see my aunt 2 times a week, every week for the next 18 years. She lived on the south side. There are people who knew her very well.
And what did she talk to you about? I mean, it wasn't like she was a neighbor that was easy for
Oh,
your
no.
parents to say, just go down the street.
No.
This was a very conscious thing that your father was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Very conscious, very important. So what did she talk to you about?
She had a way of not talking. She was more or less involved in the way she gave herself. Just passing on many family rituals that I had no idea and really was no big thing until later in life, much later. So there are things deep inside of me that I'm just bringing out because I wouldn't talk about them.
So that's quite, I mean, to think about a work of art that you have brought along since over 50 years.
Yes, and it's the way she lived. I try to live the way, I just thought her home was so beautiful. I couldn't say it, I didn't know how to say it.
So,
But I thought her home was very beautiful, the way she lived. You see, Amos lived right around the corner.
Oh.
So he knew her, the family knew her very well. They would send through Mr. Lynch vegetables from their garden.
Oh,
And he
to
would always give her a paper. She never threw away a paper. Never threw away a paper. I mean, they were all the way up to the ceiling. And I loved the way she lived. And I try to live the way she lived. That's why people don't understand my house. But I love the way she lived. And she was very kind, very beautiful, and made sure I got to learn a lot about how she grew up, where she came from. And that's a whole big story. It's a really big story.
Well, you are the consummate storyteller yourself for all of us. We learned so much with your the richness and the layers of your work that bring those stories forward to new generations of people. I mean, I think that's something that all of us feel about your work. I mean, those stories. Do you see yourself as a storyteller?
No, you know what I see is one's life begins with one's family,
Mm-hmm.
but it extends out to the community, you see. And so I've always felt that the storytellers were in the community. They're all over the place. Everybody's a storyteller. Everyone who has lived, especially if God allows me to live this long.
So, so the work, the actual work dedicated to Demba, the actual ragging on about Demba. Can you give us a little? None of us. I mean, I've seen this much of Demba, and I promised Aminah that when we finish the museum's new wing, before we put up those internal walls, that we'll take Demba, we'll bring it carefully over to the museum, and we'll unroll it so that we can all see it for the first. So she, because Aminah's never seen the whole thing unrolled.
But I know what it looks like.
Of course you do. It's in your head.
No,
That I find just amazing. But I know that it's all in your head, that you can see it in your mind's eye as you work on some small section.
But there are also rag paintings and rag drawings and
you showed me some
manuscript
of those.
pages.
We looked at those.
This is my aunt Demba.
Oh, this is Demba here?
Yes.
She's right with us.
Now you see the material. See this material right here. She brought that from Sapelo.
Oh.
It was a lot of this is this material, and it's talked about in the drum book.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
So I talk about that, this material. It was just coming apart. So I said, I've got to use this material. This was the inner lining. So Demba is coming on the bus. And this piece now belongs to Sue Cooper. Wherever she is.
There she is.
There she is. Because she had a thimble. I guess everyone has a thimble. Well, this is my thimble. But she was very good to me.
We're lucky.
As a matter of fact, she was 91 coming on the bus. She lived to be 105.
Oh, my word.
Yes, she did. And
you want to talk about hands?
the hands.
Mm-hmm. The hands are always very prominent in your work. It has special meaning to you.
Yeah, the hands are always in communication with people, with the times, with our lives.
And of course, buttons. Always buttons.
From my mother, starting. My mom made us, tablecloths were beautiful because we sewed the buttons on the tablecloths. If those buttons were not sewn correctly, she cut it out, do it over. That's how my mom did. So we did it over.
And people bring you buttons.
Just got some. Yes, I love those buttons. And was it you?
Yes.
Yes.
I brought you buttons and neckties.
I had
Oh, the neckties.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, what else do you want to talk about? What else do you want to talk about today?
Well, I want to talk about how each body of work is connected to the next. And all I want to do is to resolve a lot of the work that has been engrossed in the whole scheme of things, whatever that should mean. I have to also say that I haven't been feeling very well lately, so I am doing much better, but I have.
And having some upper respiratory sort of thing, heart, something like that. But I mean,
It's my heart.
So you're thinking. So that's why you're in a particular. I think when any of us get not feeling well, we always kind of feel more reflective on the journey we've been on, and you're thinking about how this all interconnects, how it all works together. I mean, people think of being like, they think of the body of work you did when you did your travels. Then they think of the body of, they do think of it in bodies of work. But sometimes we forget about the connectedness between those bodies.
Yes, but they're, like the presidential suite, the community suite, the Demba suite, Chile.
Chile. I was with you in Chile.
Okay.
Aminah had an extraordinary exhibition in Santiago, and I can tell you that the Chileans truly took Aminah into their hearts. They thought she was, there's the great Chilean poet Neruda, and they felt that she was up there in that sort of company. Several Chileans told me that she was of that rank, and this exhibition was just extraordinary.
I didn't know.
Yes, they did. Pablo Neruda. They thought you were up in that rank of Pablo Neruda, which, no one ever said something bad about Pablo Neruda in Chile.
In
It's really
Israel.
a dangerous thing. In Israel, you've done to Israel,
Africa,
Africa,
New York.
New York. Would you ever admit
So
what
they-
your favorite one was?
Oh no,
I
they're
know.
all
It's like asking what your favorite. Yeah, no, I know.
no, they're all beautiful. You see,
It is extraordinary.
the people were extraordinary.
Because I think it's interesting because a lot of people associate your work with Columbus. And yet though Columbus, the community of Columbus is always at the heart, there's all of this outreach that then connects back to Columbus and then goes back out again and comes back in.
Well, Columbus is always here, and I will always be here for Columbus. This is my home, and I don't ever intend to leave. I mean,
We don't
I'll
want-
go and visit, but I'm coming back home.
Well, I mean, I think that was one of the really wonderful things about the bicentennial work that you did, which had to do with, Aminah actually did a map of part of the east side of Columbus, so you could see how how the street names changed over time, and then the body of work itself had paintings of different sites, some of which are still here, and if the building was still there, we photographed it, so the site, but then also important places in the community that have left us. I mean, and it was this sort of memory of Columbus that was it really was something that no one else did related to the bicentennial.
The thing is that everything that I am, that I've become, whatever that may be or could be, came out of Columbus. Now, why would I want to leave that? No, I'm not leaving ever.
And you carry
Always.
that in your heart.
This is where life gave me opportunities to grow. as a human being. I was able to speak when I couldn't.
True.
I was able to learn something from my great aunt and my uncle.
Do you want to talk about Uncle Alvin a little bit?
Oh.
We talked about them, but Uncle Alvin's just around the corner here. So talk about Uncle Alvin.
Where's Uncle Al?
He's over there. There's a piece that is Uncle Alvin. You want to go? You can go over there, or you can just sit and talk. You want to go over and talk about it?
Well,
They can all see you.
let me see.
Here. Got it?
Oh, I didn't know that was up. That's- Hello. The strange thing is, everything happened in 1943. And I know why it happened. And I know the dates. Because my sister was born on May 13, 1943. That's when my aunt came over on the bus or the trolley and brought her into this world. It was when my father began to tell me he would let me go spend time with my great aunt, couple of days a week, and also my uncle, who went into the Air Force, to the Army, came out and spent time talking about life in Columbus. Now, I didn't have to speak because I couldn't at that time. It's a wonderful, wonderful time for me, but I don't know if it was for them. I kind of wonder if I gave them a lot of problems, but I don't know.
So
Uncle Alvin, he told some Whoppers. I because I haven't been able to get any of the information that he's given. But now there's a lot of information that he's given that is true. But it took years to find. And you have to go around.
the official story
Have to
find out.
If this is true. And I did it through maps because there was I worked with the people in the map department.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, Aminah, here's a 200 square. Why don't you see if you can bring your uncle's stories with these maps? And sure enough, you can get a lot of information through the maps. They go way back. But a lot of the information that he's given, I haven't been able to find. And
But it would seem.
and these stories didn't just start and stop. No. 1943 up to the time of his death in 1990, or a month before. Same with Aunt Demba.
Mm-hmm.
The family called her Big Annie. We were not allowed to use Aunt Demba.
Well, I would think that the more stories that you can show what their historic roots are, the more you realize that the ones you can't yet are probably equally true. It's just that you can't show them yet historically. And I know you're always very interested in looking at the stories that you have learned through family, and then comparing that to what, the official story, and then finding that there were other stories that just dropped away, that they didn't make it into the official story. I mean, I remember the first time I saw the body of work that actually was part of your bicentennial work, but even earlier than that, about the Cells Circus. And that story, very few people know that story of Columbus. And the wonderful mix of people that made up that community, that early community. I think that's something that every time I engage with your work, I always discover some aspect of life, of the community story that I had no idea. I mean, there were parts of the bicentennial work that I was like, I had no idea about that. That block and what was on that block and the people that lived there and what was there before. So why does that matter?
It does matter.
I know it does. Why?
Because people are important. They make up a body of a community that help give all of us a sense of place and the righteousness to live within this place.
One other person I'd like you to talk about before we close, because I know that people will want to talk to you one-on-one, someone that connects you to the museum as well as to the community, and that is Mr. Pierce. And a lot of people think that you are a folk artist, and I know that early on in your life that really kind of like, I was like, oh, you were like a little cranky about it, but now you're like, I don't care.
Still cranky about it.
But you're a little less cranky. Well, I remember you finally saying to me, I don't care what they call me as long as they look at the work and think about the work. But the truth is that you're a trained artist. You went to CCAD. Mr. Pierce was a folk artist, but
he was trained.
But he was trained in another way. You want to talk? Mr. Pierce had a great impact on you, a great influence on you, and his ripple effect through our community. I think people forget that. I mean, I never met Mr. Pierce. I wish I had I had the tiniest window of time where I could have met him, and I foolishly did not act on that time. So I never met him. I feel that impact and influence on me because of all the people I know that knew Mr. Pierce, and the impact on that, and then your legacy that intersects Mr. Pierce's. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Mr. Pierce lived right down the street from me. The house still stands close to Nelson and Margaret, walking distance. He was a preacher. He was everything. He was life, as was Mrs. Pierce as well. Pierce. She protected him.
A lioness.
Oh yes.
Mrs. Pierce was a lioness.
Yes. Didn't care. She protected him.
You talked about, I remember once you were talking to me about how, as a teenager, and those teen years are tough on people. I mean, one of the only good things about being older is that you're not a teenager anymore. Being a teenager is tough. Adolescence is tough. But I remember you saying that you would go to the barbershop, that you would talk to Mr. Pierce.
Only when they wanted me to.
Yes.
I wouldn't go there to just have fun or just to go. When Mr. and Mrs. Pierce invited me, you come to the barbershop today or tomorrow. At one occasion, when I got there, Mr. Pierce had did a carving of me. Can you?
Oh, wow.
don't know about this carving. There's a carving of you.
Mhm.
We own
1974.
we own a great painting, one of Aminah's works of Mr. Pierce, but that would be incredible. We could find the thing. I didn't know that. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know he carved you. I didn't know that.
Yes, with the flowers, the roses.
Oh, that is you. Okay, I do know that.
Yeah.
I'm just, my
It's
brain
on the
just-
back.
you
It's
know.
on the back of it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I do know
So
that.
you know.
I do know that piece. I'd forgotten. So, what kind of things did you learn from him that were maybe similar but different from what you learned from Uncle Alvin or Aunt Demba? What was his part of the story for you in terms of what you?
The way you walk in life. Be sincere. Don't play. Just be sincere. And I learned many ways about him. So I've always tried to be sincere in whatever I did, but also observe others. Were they sincere? Were they not sincere? And I could tell. So I just kind of leave it alone.
I was just thinking that probably has to do with of course, I don't know if you all know this, but when you would go to visit Mr. Pierce, after he began to actually let carvings go and sell carvings to people beyond the community, there were people who you could not get Mr. Pierce to sell them a carving if their lives depended on it. And then there were other people that kind of went in and he, I have a feeling that had to do with sincerity. I mean, he must have thought some people were okay to do, they would take good care of the work, they were sincere, and others were not. I suspect, I never thought of that, but I suspect that he,
That
he
is
judged
true.
it quietly without, not judging is wrong, that's the wrong word. He made an assessment. Judging was the wrong, I mean, he would have, sense. He would have a sense of them, and he would act on that sense of them. That's interesting. Oh my goodness. All right, so so we talked about Aunt Demba, we talked about Uncle Alvin. So the piece on the front wall, which is there's a detail of this right here.
Oh,
The
row
roll houses.
Yes.
Talk about that a little, because people like to know more about his specific work.
Well, formerly Champion, after you cross Mount Vernon, was Hayes.
Oh, okay.
Hayes
And
Avenue.
and those were the houses that were there.
Well, they were the houses that were there, but it was after Hayes Street
Okay.
was removed from the maps.
That's interesting.
I think that in 1903,
1903. So people were curious why they were called roll houses.
yeah, because there were row houses. There were
Oh.
row houses. I remember them.
Okay. So those really tight packed houses, yeah.
Yes, but it was across Mount Vernon on Champion, but Champion was Hayes.
I know. I remember the map. There was she did, I mean, again, you talk about bodies of work, the bicentennial body, there were independent paintings, but they were all linked by this magnificent map that Aminah had done, this hand-done map that showed you the names of streets and how they changed over time. And because you did all the research, you know the exact dates, and it gives you this layered view of Columbus.
With the help of
Yeah.
the people
At the map?
at the
In
mapping
the library.
place. Yes, because had they not said anything to me, I wouldn't have known to go to them. So they said, well, go to the map. And I think it's digital now.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
I think it's
Probably all
digital
digital
where
now.
everybody can get information that goes way back.
From the beginning, yeah. Well, last question.
But I have to say I don't have any computers in my house.
I can attest to that. I was at your house, you had no computers.
Thank you. No computers.
If I know you always say to me, it is not about me, meaning you. It's not about me as the artist, you'll say. It's about the work. It's about the community. But you do have an extraordinary, both your work, but also you as sort of this, I don't know, living wisdom within our community. I know you hate when people say this. I know you always say it's not about me, but I have to say you have a great presence for people. My daughter, who is now 30, who met Aminah for the first time when she was
7.
She's 7?
She was 7.
And throughout my daughter's childhood, she would call Aminah, my friend Aminah, and I said to her, okay, you met her once, but then she actually did meet her several times. But I mean, for a long time, she would, ever after that, she would always refer to you that way, and she never forgot that moment in her life. She was 7, and she remembers it as clear as if it happened to her yesterday. Her
Because
meaning
the
of you.
art she was creating.
Yes. But it's also your presence and the way, and yes, she loves your work. Aminah knows this for her, my daughter's high school graduation.
Where are we going with this?
Okay, we're going in, I'm talking about when she doesn't like that. Okay, so now if I say that, tell me, last question, tell me, what is it that you want everyone in this room to know? What is, if you were saying, okay, I've got just a couple of minutes to give you something to take away with you that I want you to know, what is it? What is that thing? What would you want us to know and to think about coming away from your work, and just what would you, how would you, and just
that it becomes our work, that everybody has a history, and hopefully will bring it out to the public, because you see, our history connects to the next and to the next, and without all of the history of the people, how in the world can we have a community? How in the world can we have Aunt Demba or Uncle Alvin or our parents or our community, which run in thousands of people? You see, everyone connects to this community. And if we don't see that, then somehow we are going to lose a little of our life, because your life is our life. And I am just so happy that Hammond Harkins allow us to come in and speak and see something in my work, and that's a blessing. And
well, that was a great, like, you're right. It was perfect. Our community, our well, I think that we'll close and let you all please linger. I know they want you to linger and eat. We probably haven't eaten enough of the food. Look at the work. Please talk to Aminah and enjoy her being with us. And I think it's because I'm always telling her, to stay home and work. So it's great when she's here.